There's a particular kind of silence that lives in old buildings, one you only notice when you no longer belong in them. The kind that hums beneath the fluorescent lights and buzzes faintly from the server rooms. I walked the carpeted corridor of the 10th floor of Verdanta, the biotech company I had helped build from nothing but a napkin sketch and a half-finished grant application, and I felt like I was drifting through someone else's memory. The company had changed. I could smell it in the coffee now, branded bitter and lifeless. I could see it in the art on the walls, abstract, expensive, and empty. But the real proof came as I passed the main glass conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered no privacy, only the illusion of transparency. Inside, the new CEO, Colin Everson, stood at the head of the table, flanked by a younger man in a sharp charcoal suit, Rowan Miles, the freshly minted head of human resources. They didn't see me standing there. Or maybe they did, and no longer cared. Either way, I paused by the artificial ficus trees someone had deemed wellness decor and let the scene unfold. A digital screen glowed at the end of the room, displaying a new org chart. A sprawling color-coded web of boxes and lines. My eyes were drawn to one section highlighted in a sharp, unforgiving red. It was mine. Rowan tapped the chart with one manicured finger and said, clear as crystal, "Her name's just Legacy. We'll sunset her contract." Everson nodded, not even flinching. Something inside me shifted, but it wasn't rage or grief. It was colder than that, cleaner, like the click of a sealed vault door. I stepped away from the glass and kept walking my heels, absorbing the thud of every fluorescent lit step. They thought they'd buried me with a spreadsheet. What they didn't realize, what they had clearly catastrophically forgotten, was that I had buried something too. Back at my office, I moved with the kind of precision you only learn after decades in labs and courtrooms. I powered down my terminal, cleared my desk, and slid open the lowest drawer to retrieve a small brass key taped beneath. There was a safe, at-home fireproof nondescript and older than Verdanta itself. Inside was the signature they had overlooked, and the clause they were about to learn existed. The meeting invitation was labeled Strategic Transition Briefing, sent from Rowan Miles with a neutral subject line and a timestamp that said everything I needed to know. No one called, no farewell email, just a block on my calendar and the implicit suggestion that I show up alone. Rowan's office was perched on the top floor, all glass and angles. It had the sterility of a showroom, a desk with nothing on it but a symmetrical arrangement of pens and a single fake orchid. The only personal item in the room was Rowan himself, dressed like he'd walked off a tech bro runway, expensive loafers, confident smirk, no soul. He didn't stand when I entered, just gestured to a low leather chair across from his elevated perch. "Dr. Varnon," he said smoothly, as if I were a vendor with a misprinted invoice. "Thanks for coming." A sheet of glossy paper slid across the glass between us. It was a one-page offer, consultant project-based, no salary listed, no benefits, no team, no authority, but plenty of buzzwords: flexibility, legacy input, strategic advisory. I read the whole thing once, then again slower. Not because I needed to understand it, I'd seen this maneuver before, but because I wanted him to see that I wasn't in a hurry. When I finally looked up, his smile faltered just slightly. "No, thank you," I said. His eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second, the first crack in his polished mask. "Of course," he replied. "Your badge access will end at 5. Security will walk you out." And they did, quietly. No hallway goodbyes, no final glance backward. Just a walk through the front atrium where the pillars still bore the etched mission statement I had helped write 15 years ago. One of the guards, a younger one I didn't know, held the door open looking at the floor. By 6, I was home. I walked straight to my study where the hum of silence was heavier than usual. On the second shelf, behind a row of books, I unlatched the wall panel and unlocked the safe. The leather folder inside had no label, but I didn't need one. I traced the gold letters embossed across the top Verdanta Incorporation documents. The leather creaked softly as I opened the folder. 15 years of hope and sweat lay between those pages. I flipped past the mission statement, the charter, the early bylaws, until I reached the section I had insisted on, back when we were nothing more than 5 people and a borrowed lab bench. Clause 9C, revocation of licensing by founding member. The words were printed in heavy serif font, the kind no one uses anymore. I ran my finger along the paragraph already memorized, but still satisfying to read again in full. In the event that any founding signatory is terminated without mutual consent and without documented cause, said signatory reserves the right to revoke all intellectual property licensing granted to the company with written 30-day notice. They had all thought I was paranoid when I demanded it. Elliot Rourke had grumbled over the legal fees and the others waved it off as unnecessary, but they'd let me have it eventually. I had framed it as a last resort, insurance not a threat. And then we'd built the company and we forgot. I never did. By 9:00 p.m., I had Desmond Hale on the phone. My lawyer for over 20 years, the only man I trusted to walk into a courtroom without blinking. They pushed you out, he asked, his voice already shifting into litigation mode. They tried to sunset me, I said. Rowan called me a legacy signature. He went silent for a moment. Then calmly, Clause 9C. I nodded, though he couldn't see it. Clause 9C. We didn't speak emotionally, we didn't need to. Within an hour, he had the first draft of the letter on my screen, formal, restrained, legally irrefutable. I reviewed it line by line, then printed 10 copies on thick stock paper. By morning, I would send each one by certified mail, not email, not digital signature, paper, stamp, chain of custody. Some signatures fade, but not this one. I watched the clerk at the post office stamp each envelope with practiced force. 10 in total, one for every board member and one for Colin Everson, the CEO, each addressed to their personal residences, each with return receipt requested. It felt less like sending a letter and more like placing a countdown clock on the center of their empire. Then I waited. 3 days. Nothing. 5. Still silence. No calls, no legal reply, no public acknowledgement. It was the kind of quiet that wasn't oversight, it was performance. They were pretending I didn't exist. On the 7th day, I got a message from a name I hadn't seen in months. Ciara Quinlan, once my brightest protege, now director of strategy. I had mentored her straight out of her doctoral program, pulled her into the Verdanta fold when others thought she was too idealistic. We had spent long nights in the lab dreaming of changing the world. Now her name was on the restructure paperwork. The message was brief. Just a few lines. Rowan shredded your letter. In front of 3 executives, called it deadwood from a founder's tantrum. Everyone laughed. I didn't. But I didn't stop him either. I read it twice. The betrayal wasn't in the act itself. It was in her silence. In the way she didn't stop him, not because she couldn't, but because it was easier not to try. She'd chosen the polished table over the workbench, the quarterly report over the long game. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say to a student who had become a stranger. Instead, I opened the desk drawer, pulled out the signed green return slips as they arrived one by one. Proof of receipt. 10 acknowledgments, 10 fingerprints on the fuse. They thought ignoring me was power. They thought laughing was dismissal. But the law doesn't run on noise. It runs on documents, timestamps, and signatures. And now the timer was officially counting down. On day 10, the first tremor arrived from across the ocean. On the 12th day, Desmond forwarded me an internal memo that had been quietly leaked by someone still loyal to the work, if not to me. It was from Verdanta's European liaison team. Short. Panicked. The subject line urgent. Munich contract flagged for IP inconsistency. I didn't need to read further to understand what had happened, but I did anyway. Our German distribution partner, precision-obsessed and risk-averse, had been preparing to renew a long-standing $50 million contract. As part of their due diligence, they requested a current copy of the intellectual property license covering our core technology. Verdanta sent the original agreement, the same one with my name in black ink at the bottom of page 7. The Germans had questions. Where was the updated addendum accounting for my removal? Had the co-founder who originally licensed the IP provided post-termination transfer documentation? Was the intellectual property still valid? Verdanta had nothing to give them. No signature, no waiver, no bridge between the past and the present. The deal was immediately frozen. Their next move was predictable. They rushed to patch the hole by submitting an updated license to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. New names, new structure, no mention of me. 2 days later, the USPTO rejected the filing. The grounds were clinical and devastating. Application lacks original licensor authorization. Signatory record incomplete. They had tried to erase me with an internal memo. Then they tried to overwrite me on a federal record. Neither had worked. Desmond called me after the rejection notice was officially logged. They're scrambling, he said, and every move they make is creating a deeper paper trail of negligence. I said nothing. I was sitting in my garden pulling weeds from between the stones, feeling the dirt under my nails. They're still pretending you're not real, he added. I watched a honeybee circle the lavender bush. Let them, I said. The market didn't pretend for long. That weekend, a financial blog picked up the story of the frozen German contract. By Monday, Verdanta's stock had dropped 7% before noon. The summons arrived by courier, hand-delivered with all the ceremony of panic, masked as professionalism. Verdanta was suing me for corporate extortion. The irony didn't sting, it satisfied. This wasn't a threat, it was an invitation. Desmond read through the packet while I made tea. When he looked up, he wasn't angry, he was energized. They've handed us discovery rights, he said, his tone clipped and surgical. They just opened every drawer in their house. Emails, memos, meeting minutes, legal correspondence. Every record related to my termination, the licensing, and the board's decision-making would now be fair game. They thought the lawsuit would intimidate me into backing down. Instead, it gave us permission to look under every rock. 2 days later, my inbox began to shift. Anonymous messages trickled in former colleagues using encrypted services, ghost accounts, disposable phone numbers, no signatures, just breadcrumbs. They sent me screenshots, archived attachments, and forwarded threads from internal chat logs. One file was a string of emails dated 11 months earlier. The subject line, Founder's Clause, legal concern. It was from Verdanta's in-house counsel warning Rowan directly that the clause I'd drafted could pose a significant structural liability if not managed with full cooperation from Dr. Varnon. Rowan's response was curt noted. Will handle internally. That phrase, handle internally, sat like a bruise on the page. They had known, and they had chosen arrogance over caution. That decision was now documented, time-stamped, and retrievable. Desmond filed the first formal discovery request the next morning. They're bleeding into their own trail, he said as he hit send. All we have to do is follow the drops. I nodded, watching the digital copy of the request disappear into the queue. Outside, the press had begun to whisper. The blog post about the Munich deal had already spawned speculation in investor forums, but the real detonation hadn't come yet. That arrived with the board's emergency meeting notice and my name on the invite. The boardroom hadn't changed. Still long, still dark, still designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city Verdanta once promised to clean. I sat at one end of the table beside Desmond, a stack of labeled binders resting quietly in front of him. Across from us, Colin Everson, pale and tense. Rowan Miles' expression brittle. The 9 board members flanked them, each carrying the weight of shareholders breathing down their necks. The chairman cleared his throat. This session has been called to address the current disruption to Verdanta's licensing integrity. He turned toward me, his voice quiet. Dr. Varnon, we're here to listen. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Desmond opened the top binder and began. He moved through the facts with surgical clarity, no flourish, no emotion. Just certified mail logs, delivery confirmations, time-stamped rejection letters from the USPTO. He presented Rowan's internal emails disregarding legal counsel, dismissing risk, and mocking the clause he now couldn't outrun. Then came the final document. Desmond slid a sealed affidavit across the table. "This is from Elliot Rourke," he said, "Verdanta's founding CEO." A pause rippled through the room. In it, Desmond continued, he confirms that Clause 9C was inserted to protect creators from the exact kind of administrative erasure now under review. He also confirms that every board member at the time himself included, understood, and approved it. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I could have said. I watched the faces around the table. The expressions weren't angry. They were afraid. The chairman took the affidavit with steady hands, but his eyes flicked toward Colin, then to Rowan. The woman seated at his left, one of the firm's largest investors, leaned forward and spoke, her voice so soft it felt like steel wrapped in silk. "Mr. Miles," she said, "did you knowingly authorize the removal of a founding partner without regard to the licensing clause she helped write?" Rowan opened his mouth. No answer came. The chairman didn't wait. "We'll adjourn here," he said, "and reconvene privately." As Desmond gathered the binders, no one looked me in the eye. That was when I knew day 31 would arrive without interference. The meeting didn't end. It fractured. The moment Desmond closed the final binder, the room dissolved into movement investors, huddling in quiet corners, assistants ushered in with hushed urgency. No one spoke to Colin. No one looked at Rowan. The chairman declared the session adjourned, though no one truly heard him. I stood calm amid the unraveling. As we stepped into the hallway, I caught a single word drift through the murmur behind us: resignation. It clung to the glass walls like condensation. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was anxious, but because I was waiting. The kind of stillness that settles before a controlled detonation. My press statement was already cued, reviewed, printed, and pre-approved by legal counsel. It was brief, unemotional, clean. At 9:00 a.m., it went live. Pursuant to Clause 9C of the Verdanta licensing agreement, Dr. Morel Varnon has exercised her right to revoke all intellectual property rights originally granted to Verdanta Inc., effective immediately. All manufacturing, distribution, and sale of Verdanta's primary products now constitute a violation of said rights. The headlines followed within minutes. The factory lines were frozen by 10. Orders placed in the pipeline were recalled, clients scrambling for clarity. By 11, trading on Verdanta stock was halted pending disclosure. The board issued a statement of their own, vague, apologetic, full of words like unexpected development and ongoing resolution. But it was noon when the real unraveling began. Colin Everson stepped down, effective immediately. Rowan Miles, according to an insider tip, was escorted out of the building without his laptop. The same man who'd once called me a legacy signature had become a liability footnote. My phone rang at 12:43. His number, still saved, still familiar. I let it ring twice before answering. "Sarah," he said, his voice brittle, stripped of command. "Please, just tell us what you want." I closed my eyes, not in pity, but to absorb the full satisfaction of his collapse. "It's too late, Colin," I said, my voice steady. "This isn't about what I want. It's about what you did." Then I ended the call and turned back to the next task. A week passed. The company staggered beneath the weight of its silence. No manufacturing, no sales, no statement that could make sense of the collapse. I watched from my garden, pruning lavender, while news anchors speculated and investors fumed. Then finally, the board came back. Not with lawyers, not with accusations, but with a proposal and a blank check. Desmond handed me the folder, thick with conditional language and desperate incentives. "They're offering full reinstatement," he said. "Salary, position, signing bonus. Whatever you want." I didn't need to read beyond the first page. I closed the folder and slid it back across the table. "I'm not going back," I said. He gave a slow nod. "Then what do you want?" I had already made my list. That afternoon, I met with the board not in a boardroom, but in a neutral downtown office clean of Verdanta's branding. I laid it out without venom, without triumph. Only terms. Verdanta, as it stood, was done. But something new could be built in its place. A company with ethics written into its structure, not just its press releases. A mission rooted in innovation, not quarterly returns. Research protected. Teams empowered. And me, not as a token founder or figurehead, but as a founding board member with veto power on all future leadership appointments and IP decisions. No title. No office. Just a permanent seat at the table that could not be moved. There was no debate. They agreed to all of it. Because they understood now I had never wanted revenge. I wanted protection for the thing we once swore mattered. 3 days later, the paperwork was signed. A new company was born, not a resurrection of the old, but a reconstruction on stronger ground. Verdanta's name was quietly retired. The press tried to spin it as a pivot, but those of us who'd been there from the beginning knew the truth. I had revoked their right to forget what we built. And now I was rebuilding it on my terms. The morning I walked through the new front doors, I saw it there just beneath the etched glass logo. The new company launched quietly. No champagne, no headlines. Just a quiet announcement across the industry press and a website that went live with a single word at the top, Solithra. Light Reborn. The name was mine. I had chosen it not for how it sounded, but for what it promised. Something clean, something earned. On the first morning, I arrived early, not as an executive, not as a guest of honor, but simply as the person who had made sure the walls wouldn't crumble this time. The building was modest by comparison to Verdanta's glass towers, but it hummed with energy. Not the false buzz of rushed product launches or PR teams. It was the hum of people doing real work again. As I passed the new lab entrance, I stopped. To the right of the doorway, affixed in brushed metal, was a small rectangular plaque. Nothing flashy, no corporate logo, just 2 lines. Dr. Morel Varnin Integrity is the foundation, and the signature is the cornerstone. I stood there for a long moment, letting the quiet weight of it settle over me. They had once called me a legacy, a ghost, a name on a line, and in the end, that name had undone everything they thought they could control. It hadn't taken shouting. It hadn't taken revenge. Just a signature written carefully years ago by someone who had already imagined this moment might come. Power doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it watches. Sometimes it moves silently beneath the floorboards until the house above collapses under its own arrogance. I didn't destroy Verdanta. They forgot what held it together. I only reminded them, on paper, in ink. Now, as I walked deeper into the lab, the hum of machines and soft voices echoing around me, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt ready. And I knew somewhere out there, someone else was holding a signature of their own, buried, overlooked, powerful, waiting for the day they would remember what it was worth.